talking an American haunting. This one is directed by Courtney Solomon and stars Donald Sutherland and Sissy Spacek. Now, this is an adaptation of the apparently true life case of the Bell Witch haunting, which was a purportedly true haunting that took place in the early 19th century. And as far as I know, was the only time in American law someone's cause of death was officially caused by paranormal activity. And that's the real truth. So this is an adaptation of the story, although it does take some liberties with the purported true story, and we're going to discuss it. But in case you are unfamiliar, in the kind of that sort of time period, any type of supernatural event, so to speak, was called a witch, you know. So this was really a straight haunting, and Aaran reviewed a Bell Witch documentary a little while ago, and they did explain this in this documentary that, you know, any type of supernatural event, like a haunting, as in this movie depicts, would be referred to as a witch. So that's kind of what it is. It's actually a haunting movie. So we have this family with John Bell, he's kind of the patriarch, played by Donald Sutherland, and their property is menaced by a variety of supernatural entities, some quite serious kind of hauntings, some quite violent, and as the story progresses, certainly in this story, there is a kind of an underlying mystery about maybe what's kind of going on. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So, what can we say in the positive column? This is a quite lavish production, I have to say, and if you're a fan of period dramas and kind of like the Puritan era sort of style, like American history, stuff like that, where everywhere is kind of very kind of religious and things like this, and it really makes you realise how different maybe today's society is. It's a worthwhile drama in that regard, and I think the production values are very good, and the set design, for example, this old kind of style mansion looks fantastic, although I believe it's not historically accurate to the time period as far as I've read, but nonetheless it looks fantastic on screen, and there are some great use of cinematography, lighting, music to kind of really give you this kind of spooky atmosphere. The director also looks like he's taken some notes from Sam Raimi in regards to kind of like a point of view perspective from the kind of the spirits, where we see this kind of like the spirit kind of moving around, weaving between people and stuff like that, that will kind of, although it's never kind of as kinetic as The Evil Dead, it will definitely remind you of that sort of series of films. Now, you've got some very capable actors in the form of Donald Sutherland, who is always very watchable. You've also got Rachel Hurd-Wood as well, playing Betsy Bell. John and Betsy tend to be the people who are affected the most by the this kind of like this haunting. I've got to say the acting all around is pretty solid, and there are a couple of spooky moments, and I think set pieces where the movie does do a good job in kind of giving you some quite creepy moments. This is almost like a Conjuring-esque kind of style movie in many ways, and I feel it's not as successful. It doesn't quite do as good a job of building that fear and tension as like the Conjuring movies, but I think it's a credible attempt to have a reasonable good kind of ghost story here, which makes it obviously even more interesting because this is based off probably one of the most famous, at least American hauntings. But herein lies the problem. Now, this will be somewhat of a spoiler. I will try and be as vague as possible. The movie is a adaptation or inspired by, and as such, the movie decides to go in a sort of narrative direction, which was never, as far as I know, a part of the real case. Now, movies do this all the time, but the problem here is you're talking about real people, and this movie makes the character of John Bell do something which is quite bad, shall we say. He does something which in the movie is pretty despicable, which there is never any evidence of him doing this in kind of real life. And as such, you have to kind of really wonder, was this somewhat is this kind of contemptible in some ways? When you're dealing with a fictional character, then fair enough. But if you're dealing with someone who has existed and has probably got descendants to this day, and you're depicting them in a way which was never, you know, it was never established that this would happen. I don't know if it's in particularly good tastes, I have to say, just to kind of make the movie more melodramatic. Now, the whole crux of why they're getting hauntings is to do with this fact, and it's a questionable decision, I have to say. You might not care, you might think it works in the format of just a kind of a movie, but in the context, as it is based on real people, I find it questionable a decision to kind of really do this. It's kind of where I'll say on that. I have to say, outside of the moral issues of it, it does make it seem somewhat melodramatic, and it kind of makes it feel like somewhat of a TV movie that you would kind of see on the Hallmark Channel in a lot of ways, because the interpersonal relationships of this movie are really kind of put to the forefront. The movie is bookended by some sequences in modern day, completely unnecessary and absolutely nothing to the story. And I think those sequences are quite cheesy. Again, it ties into the questionable decisions about the John Bell character as well. Although I think some of the kind of the sequences are relatively scary, it never really becomes a true horror film, if you ask me. I mean, it's quite a watchable kind of ghost story, but I never really felt any genuine sense of kind of fear or jump scares and stuff like this. It all feels relatively kind of muted, because the story is told in such a kind of a mundane way, you know, and it feels so much like a kind of a TV movie or a made for television special or something like that. It never really feels particularly kind of jarring at any point or disturbing. It just kind of feels, you know, going through the motions, despite the fact that this is clearly influenced by other kind of horror properties. Overall, it's still a watchable movie. Whether the decision to make the John Bell character act in a particular way, I have to be honest with you, I think it was in poor taste. If someone who has a real, you know, based on a real person, I think you have to be somewhat true to the source. You can't kind of make stuff up just for kind of dramatic effect. At least not major things like this. I mean, you might not know the ins and outs of their personal lives, but to have such a big reveal about this character, I got to say, I thought it was not to have just a dramatic effect. I didn't think it was really well handled. I'll give this one a 5 out of 10 though, because it's watchable. It's kind of an interesting kind of ghost story, but it never really raises its head above any type of classicness, or it's relatively kind of mediocre at the end of the day. 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to you next time. Bye for now.